Okay, so we're going to begin with, as we do each time, with a little meditation as a motivation and in sort of implicitly taking refuge in generating bodhicitta. So sit comfortably, spine straight. Relax your body, relax your mind. Don't multitask, don't be thinking of other things. Place your attention, first of all, on your respiration. Recognize it. Without controlling it, just keep that in mind. Place your mindfulness on the breathing in front. Let go of other thoughts. Sometimes you can add counting to occupy the mental consciousness more so that you have less room to be distracted. You can think, this is the first inhalation. Now it's turning around. This is the second. This is the first exhalation. Now it's changing direction. This is the second inhalation, and so forth. Now, if you've calmed your mind a bit, or calmed your body, relaxed your body, now bring your attention away from paying attention to the breathing and pay attention to the contents of your mental consciousness. And as a result of that, focus on the nature of the mind, nature of the mental consciousness within which various thoughts and images are arising, what we call the clear light nature of the mind, the conventional clear light nature of the mind. Mental image you might have is of like a clear sky that's unobstructing, recognizing there is no obstruction to the arisal of thoughts or to the reintegration of those thoughts back into the consciousness, disappearance of them, like clouds that evaporate back into a clear sky on a sunny day. Let go of any thoughts as they arise. Reintegrate that attention back into the attention on the clear light nature of the mind. There may be other subtler appearances to your mind, such as the appearance of your body to your mental consciousness, as though it's looming there and irrefutable. That's just the appearance to your mental consciousness. You don't have to pay attention to it. Try to refocus on the nature of the mind in which that is appearing. Let go of the sense of your self-identity, your ego, your I, that seems to be the observer. That's appearing to your mental consciousness also. When we meditate on emptiness, we might try to enhance that to see what the basis for that appearance is. But here, just letting go of that. And even letting go of the appearance of the clear light nature of your mind that you have now, that's a mental image, as though trying to go beyond imagining it and actually experiencing it. More subtle consciousness within which that mental image was embedded. This clear light nature of the mind is, conventional clear light nature of the mind is what's called the developmental Buddha nature, renowned in all of the Tibetan Buddhist traditions as something to keep in mind, to cherish when things get chaotic in life, to recognize we have this Buddha nature all the time and let go of other worries, fears. The fact that we can meditate in this way now is due to the fact we are experiencing a life of leisure and endowment, perfect human rebirth. The maturation or the ripening of karma we created in many lives in the past out of effort, virtuous karma, which has incredible significance or value, meaning. We can use this to develop this life, to develop virtuous qualities, to culminate those virtuous qualities. We can even achieve enlightenment or liberation this lifetime, develop renunciation, bodhicitta, wisdom that realizes emptiness. But this opportunity is being lost every moment. We're getting closer and closer to our inevitable death, so as not to waste this opportunity this morning. I think I'm going to participate in the class on mind and mental factors this morning to better understand the laboratory of my mind, within which these great spiritual experiments are undertaken to develop bodhicitta, wisdom, renunciation. Particularly this morning, the discussion on the 11 virtuous mental factors, to try to enhance my behavior, my mind, by practicing them, and to eventually be able to develop real heartfelt compassion for all sentient beings, not only our friends and family or even strangers, but even our enemies, putting them all on an equal footing, working for their benefit. Like I said about the Buddha, even if someone were to apply sandalwood paste, massage one side of his body with loving care, and another person were to be cutting flesh from the other side of his body out of malice, the Buddha's mind would be equanimous toward both. All sentient beings have been our mothers numberless times in the past. Equally, not just our present mother or those that we like, but even our enemies, strangers. They are, in addition to that, exactly equal with us in wanting to be free from suffering, wanting to have happiness. As the tendency to work for our own welfare is based on a misconception, grasping to a self, the persons, to these aggregates, we can recognize that we can identify with the welfare of all sentient beings as though they are our aggregates, our form aggregates throughout the universes, that their mind streams are just as precious as our own mind stream, feelings of happiness and suffering and so forth. Try to develop a motivation to listen this morning to achieve eventually enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. We will achieve both aims, our own aim of total blissful happiness and the welfare of others, the aim of others by achieving enlightenment, because then we can effortlessly and spontaneously engage in activities such as emanating the nirmanakaya, form body of emanation, or the enjoyment body, the sambhogakaya, to lead sentient beings into that same blissful state. So that's my goal today. That should be my goal all the time. Even though we get distracted in everyday activities, we have to watch the road, we have to watch the stove so we don't burn the soup or the meal. But our main aim is always to achieve enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. So having instituted that, motivation, bring your attention back to the present. And here we are. So does anyone have a question about the subject so far? Some of the people are new. Dylan's joined us first time, I think. I'm not sure who Mikkel is, but we're studying mind and mental factors. Last course we did was the 7 ways of knowing. We talked about consciousness in general. Now we've talked about primary mind, the difference between primary mind and mental factors. We've already gone over the omnipresent mental factors that are present all the time, the object ascertaining mental factors. There are 5 of each, 5 omnipresent mental factors, 5 object ascertaining mental factors. We've gone over different debates and ideas whether the object ascertaining mental factors are present in the sense consciousnesses. And now we've reached the point of talking about the virtuous mental factors. So the omnipresent mental factors and the object ascertaining mental factors, are they virtuous or non-virtuous? Ida?
Okay. Repeat the question again. Did you say the omnipresent mental factors?
Right.
Okay. Not necessarily virtuous or non-virtuous. They're just present, correct?
They're present. They might be virtuous by fact that they're present in a mind in which other mental factors, like these 11 virtuous mental factors, have made the mind virtuous. By the force of the other mental factors, they might be virtuous, but by their nature, they're not virtuous, they're not virtuous. What about the object ascertaining mental factors, like wisdom?
Not necessarily virtuous, like you said, they could be, perhaps with the intention there, it can become a virtuous thing, correct?
Right, exactly. So though they, by their nature, are neutral, the omnipresent mental factors and the object ascertaining mental factors, but they may be present and take on the quality of a virtuous or non-virtuous mind. Now we're talking, yeah, go on.
I have a question.
Yes.
I want to go back to main minds. This has been something that's been on my mind for a little bit.
A main question in your mind, okay.
Yes. You mentioned that there can only be one main mind present at a particular moment. But let me give you an example. I'm listening to you and I'm looking at you. So there's 2 main minds operating at the same time.
The missing word is there's only one main consciousness in each consciousness. So there's one main eye consciousness, one main ear consciousness, one main nose consciousness. When I say main, primary, one main mental consciousness. Even there, in some circumstances, there's some debate. Maybe in some rare circumstances, there might be 2 streams of mental consciousness, one is which is conceptual and one of which is direct perception. But in general, we say there's just one main consciousness. That means of each of them. So the fact that you are looking and hearing and maybe if you have an ache in your body, feeling and so forth, and thinking at the same time, there's no contradiction because they are main minds of different consciousnesses.
Yeah, I still have a difficulty understanding that or accepting that. Think of a mother, a mother on the phone, cooking a meal, tasting the meal, helping her child with homework.
Right.
I mean, this is all happening at the same time. How can it be?
Right. So in the case of, say, the mental consciousness paying attention to the, like this, just to reiterate, and also for Dylan and other people that are new, generally it's said that the sense consciousnesses, other than the mental consciousness, are like cameras. They're just receptive. They don't make any decisions. They're not thinking. They're like the cameras, like you see, if you watch the crime shows, check the footage of when you watch FBI, check the surveillance footage, So the surveillance footage, even the recordings, or if the person is watching them, the surveillance videos are not thinking, right?
But there is a process going on. So there must be something.
They're not thinking, the surveillance cameras, but the guy or gal in the basement who's looking at the monitors is evaluating, oh, there's someone breaking a window, putting his arm through the window, taking out the jewels or something. So the mental consciousness is that entity that is aware of what the sense consciousnesses are observing, and it makes decisions about them, even can motivate the muscles to turn the head or the eyes in a certain direction and so forth. It can modify what the senses are perceiving, but and generally it can have a couple of things in mind at the same time. You could be thinking your child, whether the tofu is burning or whatever, the toast is burning, but generally you can't keep more than one or two, maybe three things partially in mind at the same time. Otherwise, you're not aware of them. Mental consciousness. If you're really concentrating on one thing entirely, something else may be appearing to your senses, but it doesn't leave enough of an impact to the mental consciousness. That's what we learned earlier is inattentive perception, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so does that help a little?
One more thing.
Oh, yeah.
I was thinking, and I'll stop. Like an interpreter, there's so many mental processes happening in a language interpreter. I used to be a professional language interpreter. You see in the body language, you see in the lips of the person, you are taking on the nuances of the language, the registry of the language, and you're processing the meaning of that and translating that into another language and almost simultaneously interpreting that into the other language. So it's so much happening.
Yeah, so the point is here, the mental consciousness, if we assume there's one mental consciousness, it can pay partial attention to several things, like let's say the person watching the screens, the surveillance screens in the basement of the big building, kind of, peripheral vision, maybe two of the monitors are very important, they're paying attention. They're different ideas. Sometimes it's said that the mind pays attention to something for a couple of mind instants and then reverts to the other one that it's paying attention to, or that it is the mind being very, if a mind is very sharp, has a good quality, that it may be partially aware, like you say, the facial expression of the person who's talking, their body language and their words, partially at the same time, maybe centering on one instant, more one on the other instant, but keeping a little bit of them present in mind. Some other things are going to be ignored, whether you've got a pain in your back while you're translating, you try to let go of that. If you pay attention to that, you lose what's being said, or, if someone else is talking into the corner, you try to ignore that. Otherwise, when the mind becomes too bifurcated or trifurcated, that, you're not going to be able to keep the other ones in mind. Okay.
Thank you, Venerable.
Okay.
It makes more sense. Yeah.
Okay.
And it's just we have such an amazing minds.
Yeah, that's why this course is useful. So now we're talking about the virtuous mental factors. Those by their nature are virtuous. And so I'm going to go out on a limb here and say, like we're going to say debate. It follows that David Macklis can't list the 11 mental virtuous factors. And you would say, you're wrong because they are
Faith. Shame.
Shame.
Faith, shame, embarrassment, non-attachment, non-hatred, non-ignorance, effort, pliancy, conscientiousness, equanimity, and non-harmfulness.
so in debate, Donnie would be everyone would go boo because the question was asked to David. So it sometimes in some debates, if someone doesn't know, the other classmates whisper in his ear or they say in the background or something. But so that was good. So faith is the first one we're going to be talking about again today. Sense of shame. You could say sense of shame or knowing shame. Consideration for others. Then the three roots of virtue, say non-attachment, non-hatred, non-bewilderment, enthusiastic perseverance. Here, it doesn't mean like enthusiasm to make money or something. It definitely has the enthusiasm to work for virtuous things. Pliancy or suppleness, conscientiousness, equanimity, a particular kind of mental factor, equanimity, that's used in developing tranquil abiding, and non-belligerence or ahimsa. Have you ever heard of ahimsa? What is ahimsa, Stephen? Who is famous for in the last century?
Oh, I think it was it Gandhi? I'm guessing there, but ahimsa,
Yeah.
I've heard translated as non-harm.
Yeah, non-harm, non-violence.
Non-violence.
Martin Luther King, on the basis of all the protests that Gandhi did, that were all ahimsa, non-violent. They would just even get beaten and so forth. Martin Luther King and others. So that's the 11th one that's synonymous with compassion. So let's go through these now. Faith. In Tibetan Tepa. Regarding the quality of faith, the Abhidhamma Samachaya, the Compendium of Knowledge, says, what is faith? It is a conviction, clarity, and wishing with respect to an existent, with respect to something that exists. Just believing, having faith in something like that doesn't exist is not called faith. That is endowed with excellent qualities. What is endowed with excellent qualities? The thing that it's having faith in, the existent thing that has excellent qualities and power. In other words, having faith, as we said before, in your bookmaker or something like that, you place your bets with, or that's not the right word, the person who's cheating on your taxes for you. I have faith in them because they will protect my wealth, but they're not endowed with excellent qualities. They're cheating on the income tax and everything. The function of faith is to act as a support for aspiration. Where was aspiration in the mental factors? Christine, do you remember? Was that one of the mental factors we already went over? Aspiration? You have to unmute while you're thinking. You multitask. There.
Yes, aspiration was a mental factor, and it is one of the, it's not omnipresent, it's the next one, the
object ascertaining, right?
The object ascertaining mental factors.
So it's like a desire, like in bodhicitta, the desire or aspiration to achieve enlightenment out of the desire to free sentient beings from suffering. Aspiration. So all aspiration is based on faith. So it says faith has the function of acting as a support for aspiration. Faith is very, very important in our spiritual practice. Sometimes people today would like to think that faith is like F-A-I-T-H. I was going to say a 5-letter word, a 4-letter word or something like that. It's something that's only dumb people have. And what you really need is wisdom and so forth. Of course, we need both faith and wisdom. Faith will be superseded when we have direct realization of things. But until then, we need faith to continue on. Lama Zopa Rinpoche has said that, people that are today, Western people, kind of eschew faith is not important, but what we need is reasoning and so forth. And of course, reasoning, like we studied earlier with Dharmakirti and all of the logic and everything, that's very important. But in terms of higher practices, like say the practice of Tantra, Rinpoche said, between someone who's very intelligent, has a lot of logic and so forth, and someone who has a great deal of faith, faith is even more important in that case, because there are a lot of things that can't be proved so much logically. So it's the basis of our spiritual practice. I remember Ngari Rinpoche. I don't know, any of you heard of Ngari Rinpoche? Bob, you know all these Tibetan, no, you don't know. Shankar usually knows these Tibetan things. He's off. Ngari Rinpoche is the youngest brother of the Dalai Lama. I think all of his brothers were recognized as incarnate lamas. Ngari Rinpoche said he thought that, especially today, the emphasis in the West on intelligence and knowledge and so forth was missing the point. To get back to basics, we had to start from the mental factor of faith, to develop that, to be able to practice. So what is faith? It's a conviction, clarity, and wishing. So it's talking about 3 kinds of faith. Faith is a knower. It's a mental conscious. It's a mental consciousness. Is faith only a mental consciousness? Is it in the sense consciousnesses? Who can tell me? It's not in the sense consciousness, right? Remember my Italian mudra here. No, it's only in the mental consciousness. It's a knower that has the aspect of conviction, clarity, or wishing, and serves as the direct antidote for non-faith. So in one of the commentaries on Mind and Mental Factors that I have access to, the translation, that right at the beginning, it says faith is the antidote of non-faith. Well, happens to be, it serves as a direct antidote, but that's not the full definition of faith. When faith is divided, there are 3 types. Lucid faith, or here it's translated clarifying faith, clear faith. Dangwe depa. Dangwa can mean clear. Sometimes it's just used as a synonym of faith. Dangwa, lucid state of mind. Secondly, a faith of conviction, or faith of belief. Conviction, I think, better fits it, where your faith is based on having analyzed something, not just seen qualities and felt the charisma of something, but is based on some conviction that has come about through analysis. And wishing faith. Wishing faith is a faith that, having seen some good qualities and understood them or believing them to be possible, wishes to achieve them. I want to become like the Dalai Lama. I want to become like Lama Zopa Rinpoche. Okay, so here, more detail here. Clarifying faith is a lucid mind, a clear mind, brought about by seeing the excellent qualities of those so endowed. Those doesn't mean necessarily persons. When I say the triple gem, the 3 jewels, are they persons? Danny says no. What do you think, Danny? The triple gem, the 3 jewels. Are any of the 3 jewels persons?
Yeah, Dharma. I'm sorry, Sangha. Yeah.
How about Buddha?
And Buddha.
Generally, so we can talk about Buddha in different ways. Some that usually we say Kangsaki Sangye or something like that, the person of Buddha. So, the omniscient mind itself, but Buddha also includes the emptiness of the Buddha's mind, what's called the nature body, right? That Svavavikakaya. Is that a person? Christine says yes, the Svavavikakaya is a person. Well, the Svavavikakaya is the emptiness of the Buddha's mind.
No, Sambhogakaya is a person.
Sambhogakaya is a person,
Not
Nirmanakaya is a person.
Svabhavikakaya.
The person of Buddha is a person. The Buddha as a person is a Buddha when we think of them as a person. But so of the triple gem, the Buddha, the Sangha are persons. The Dharma is not a person, right? But here, so when it says seeing the excellent quality of those so endowed, it doesn't mean only persons, such as the three jewels. Why is it called clarifying or lucid? For example, when one places a water purifying gem, I was joking last time about Brita filters or something like that, in dirty water, the murkiness of the water is immediately cleared away. A water purifying gem is something that may be karmically arise to certain people who have the karma for it. Placing it in water causes the mud to sink and the water to become lucid. So, for example, when one places a water purifying gem in dirty water, the murkiness of the water is immediately cleared away. Similarly, when this faith is generated, lucid faith is generated, the murkiness of the mind is cleared away, whereupon all excellent qualities of realization become suitable to arise in one's continuum. So when we're meditating on the clear light nature of the mind, we're trying to let the murkiness and other discordant thoughts go away, right? That's not necessarily faith, but it can be based on faith that such a quality does exist because we're trying to imagine it and trying to bring it to fore. When faith is present, the other kinds of doubts, adverse states of mind and so forth are subdued. So it is said by its very nature to be virtuous. And in so doing, when you have that lucid kind of faith, even though it may not be based on deep reasoning, just on seeing qualities and aspiring for them and so forth, it creates a situation where, what does it say? The excellent qualities of realization become suitable to arise in one's continuum. So the mind is lacking the contradicting factors that would prevent you from having realization. Okay, clarifying faith or lucid faith. Second, stronger of kind of faith is the faith of conviction, is the gaining of conviction through contemplating the modes of dependent arising, cause and result, and so forth that are taught by the conqueror. So again, faith of conviction is referring to qualities or beings that are advantageous, that are positive, that do exist. Having faith in false gurus. In India, there's so many, well, in America too, and probably in Buddhism also, there are people that propound themselves as teachers that have bad motivations, maybe ulterior motives for power or wealth or whatever. So there are people who do follow them sometimes. Remember the person in South America, what was it, Guyana or something, Jim Jones? Okay, some of you are old enough. Donnie, I wouldn't have thought you were old enough to remember. Lewis and I remember. Jim Jones was, Doris remembers. Nadine, did you ever, Jim Jones? You never heard, maybe. Jim Jones was a Christian, so-called Christian, that had a big colony in North and South America. What was it, Guinea or Guyana or something? And there were hundreds of people there that were his followers that had faith, quote, faith in him. And he told them all, now the government was coming to shut them down. They should all drink this Kool-Aid, which had been laced with cyanide. And I think either every single one of them died or maybe one or two lived. So that would not be called, from a Buddhist perspective, their feeling, their belief in him was not real faith because he didn't have the qualities that they were attributing to him. Faith of conviction is a faith that has gained conviction through contemplating the ways in which dependent arising, cause, and result, and so forth come about, that are taught by the conqueror, the Buddha. Wishing faith is slightly different. Wishing faith is, for instance, having contemplated the ways, here it says the modes, the ways, the Four Noble Truths, the modes of the Four Noble Truths, ascertained true sufferings and true origins as objects of abandonment, and true cessations and true paths as objects of attainment. And having understood that these can be attained if one makes the proper effort, the faith thinking, I shall definitely obtain them. So wishing faith is based on either lucid faith or faith of conviction, that something has good qualities. And having understood, like when we meditate on the clear light nature of the mind, I can develop that by creating the proper karma, also understanding karma, avoiding the adverse conditions. I can develop those. Therefore, I'm going to do that, wishing for that, aspiring for that, and working for that. That is emblematic of wishing faith. Yeah, Doris.
Thank you, Venerable. I'm not sure of this word modes, how it's being used. And it reminds me that I'm a little confused on modes and varieties as well.
Right. So the Tibetan word here is sul, like my name, Sultim. Sul can be translated as modes. So like very, how to say, dictionary-like, but you could just say the ways, the various kinds, let's say, contemplated the modes of the Four Noble Truths, having thought about the various of the various varieties of the Four Noble Truths. Modes also includes how they function and so forth. So that's the word modes is used with respect to the Four Noble Truths, the varieties of the Four Noble Truths. Ascertained true sufferings and true origins as objects of abandonment. That is what you would, when you contemplate the modes of the Four Noble Truths or the varieties of the Four Noble Truths, you would ascertain or develop certainty that true sufferings and true origins are to be abandoned. Right? You develop certainty in that, and you develop certainty that true paths and true cessations and true abandonments, true paths, true cessations and true paths are to be attained. Of the Four Noble Truths, the first Noble Truths are to be abandoned, the truth of suffering and the truth of the cause of suffering, or the truth of or origination of suffering. And the second two, the last two of the Four Noble Truths, are that which you're trying to attain. So having understood these as being real, as existing, and then developing the wish to achieve them, knowing that it's possible to achieve them, that you have Buddha nature, you can achieve them, falls under wishing faith, that kind of faith that's aspiring to achieve them. Okay. Here, the author has merely identified some illustrations of the three types of faith. It is not that all instances, that all types have been exhausted here. Now, the next sentence and the following, it has to do with the Tibetan words. So it says, nowadays in our world, liking something and having faith in something are spoken of as if they are the same. I don't think we usually use that in English so much. If you like your husband, you don't usually, or your wife, you don't, or your friends, you don't necessarily say you have faith in them. That would seem to be sometimes an attribute. You know, you have faith. If someone's a really good friend, you might have faith in them. But in Tibetan, colloquially, it sounds like that. So it's not necessarily something that we have to dwell on a lot here. It has to do with the Tibetan language. Nowadays in our world, liking and faith are spoken of as if they are the same thing. Liking beer is said to be faith in beer. We don't say that in English, right? You know, chang, you know the Tibetan word, their alcoholic beverage made from barley, sometimes other things. But liking and faith are nevertheless not the same. We don't have to dwell a lot on this. Faith is by entity a virtuous mental factor, whereas liking has both virtuous and non-virtuous factors. If this is explained in detail, you can say that we always talk about these four possibilities of something. If you have two things, you can have two possibilities, that it is both A and B, that it is neither A and B, that it is A but not B, that it is B and not A. Those are called the four alternatives in analyzing two things. Tibetan, we say mu shi. Mu means alternatives or sides. Shi means four. So what are the four possibilities or the mu shi here? That which is liking but not faith. So it is, say if liking is A and faith is B, it is A but not B. Something that is liking but is not faith. Example, liking one's son, one's wife, and so forth, and liking others, and liking sources of misdeeds, such as drinking alcohol, snorting coke, eating meals after noon when one is ordained. So those are examples of liking but not faith. Second, that which is faith but not liking. So that which is B but not A. For example, fear from one's depths and faith of conviction regarding the drawbacks of the suffering of cyclic existence. Yeah, so if you have faith that cyclic existence is of the nature of suffering, that's faith, but it's not liking. You don't like cyclic existence. Actually, you're repulsed by it. So that's an example of faith, but not liking. That which is both faith and liking, faith from one's depths. Here it means from the depth of one's heart. Faith from the depth of one's heart, and liking due to contemplating the excellent qualities of the spiritual guide, the gurus, and the benefits of wholesome actions and their results. So that's, one appreciates or likes those things, and it is also faith. And that which is neither faith nor liking, anger, suffering, and so forth, those are neither faith nor liking. They're just something else. Okay, comfortable? Qualm. That means, doubt. That someone is raising, the author is raising a hypothetical doubt. When it says qualm, that means some people might think this. Well, then, are liking and respect the same, or are they different? Respect. Where did respect come in here? Why did we start talking about respect? When we talk about guru devotion, what are the two things that one tries to develop? Do you know, Bob? So in the Nonharm, all the meditations are developing faith and developing respect. Usually developing faith in the spiritual guide is by contemplating their qualities. And what is the factor for developing respect for the spiritual guide? Stephen, do you know? In the Nonharm, those are the main outlines.
That the guru is inseparable from the Buddha. Would that generate respect?
That would be
Yes.
more in this faith side, generating
Okay,
faith.
thank you, Venerable George.
Respect is by remembering their kindness. So in the Nonharm, when we go through the stages of the Nonharm, there's two things. Also in the Lama Chopa Puja and everything, developing faith by recognizing their qualities. Like you could say they're one with the Buddha or something like that. They're compassionate, they have great wisdom and so forth. Remembering their kindness generates respect for them. So here, that's maybe why respect is brought up in this context, because they're often associated slightly different. When we talk about guru devotion, you need to have both faith and respect. So, then, are liking and respect the same, or are they different? Again, in the world, we speak of them as if they are the same. Again, this is kind of specialty of Tibetan language. We don't necessarily use them as the same, but in fact, they are not. Liking a spiritual friend is faith, but respect for him or her involves contemplating their kindness. Yeah. Liking a spiritual friend or having faith in a spiritual, liking a spiritual friend is faith, but respect for him or her involves contemplating their kindness, knowing shame, that is, having a sense of shame, and valuing them highly. Hence, when liking and respect arise in the continuum, they are separate mental factors. Okay, that's not something that should be worrisome here. It's a little bit idiosyncratic of Tibetan language that these various words seem to be used in Tibetan in the same way, but we wouldn't necessarily use them in English the same way. Maybe. Are we okay? Okay. So if in accordance with how they appear in the great treatises, you analyze these modes in detail with the wisdom of individual investigation, examining the way in which they are generated in the continuum, by turning your mind inwards, then you will get to know them. It's talking about these various kinds of faith, right? Turning your mind inward, you can get to know them. So don't leave these definitions as mere words. See if you can recognize in your own mind, if you have some faith of aspiration, some wishing faith to achieve, to become a better person, to become a bodhisattva, to overcome your negative qualities, negative faults, saying negative qualities, negative. See if you have faith that what we call clear faith, clarifying faith, or lucid faith, that without a great degree of analysis, having perceived some good qualities in the gurus, like I mentioned last week about, coming late at night, going out to make pee-pee late at night at Kopan, listening to Lama Zopa and Lama Yeshe, laughing at, 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning and thinking, just, the qualities that they might have. You have to analyze in your own mind. Stephen, yeah.
Thank you, Venerable George. I had a question about the relationship between wishing faith and the other two faiths, clarifying and conviction. So it would, at first thought, it would seem that wishing faith would require the faith of conviction in order for it to be stable. But could you begin to develop wishing faith just based on clarifying faith or lucid faith?
I think so. Like I say, the example I gave of Lama Zopa, Lama Yeshe, seeing these qualities, even without analyzing in depth, one could think, I'd like to be like them. I'd like to be like the Dalai Lama. Oh, so many people have that experience when they hear teachings by the Dalai Lama. I'd like to be like that, So I think it could be based on both lucid faith or faith of conviction. There has to be a certain amount of faith that these qualities exist. So there has to be either one or the both of those to be to generate the wish to achieve them. Okay. Oh, Christine, you have a pale hand, so I didn't see it on your.
Oh, I know. I'll make it
there.
dark with my mantra, my mandala. Now it's not showing. Thank you, Venerable George. My question is, in one of my other studies, I came up with faith. Faith of conviction is knowing that the Buddha is a valid refuge. I'm studying refuge right now. And they talk about these faiths. So my question is,
that's not the only faith of conviction. That's an example of faith.
Okay, right.
Yeah,
So
right.
how do I know, like you talk about, look inside and see what kind of faith do you have? And so sometimes I think I have faith of conviction, and then I think, no, I don't think I really have that yet. How do you know when you really have that? What would be the signs that,
demarcation? Well, yeah, it's a little bit of sliding scale. So we have, we can develop that faith of conviction by analyzing that the Buddha is a perfect refuge. And that takes, in the Uttara Tantra, one of the great texts that Maitreya wrote, one of the 5 treatises. It's not about Vajrayana Tantra. Tantra just means continuum, mental continuum, which is one of the reasons it's used to talk about the tantric path, because you're dealing with the mental continuum. So in the Uttara Tantra, there are in-depth definitions of the Buddha jewel, the Dharma jewel, the Sangha jewel, all the qualities they have. And so analyzing those, whether the Buddha has the qualities of being a perfect refuge, as you develop through your own experience, maybe a certain, based on, let's say, your own experience in applying the antidotes, you notice that the Dharma, as you apply the antidote of realization of impermanence, that things are impermanent, that it calms the mind, developing more and more conviction that the Dharma is the actual refuge. When we talk about the 3 jewels, the triple gem, of the 3, we could say the Dharma is the actual refuge. That's what you take actual refuge in. Right. Applying the antidotes, developing good qualities through effort and meditation, you develop conviction that these work. So it's a sliding scale. You did a little more conviction, more conviction, more conviction. It's based on your own experience and logic. And then that becomes stronger than just the faith, the lucid faith. So I'm not sure who, I think Doris had her yellow hand up first.
Thank you, Venerable.
Mhm.
Is confidence synonymous with faith?
I'm not sure. We say I'm confident. We could use confidence and, confident faith. I'm not sure. Maybe you could say that's kind of like faith of belief. I don't think confidence itself is necessarily synonymous with faith. Play around with it in your mind and see how it's used in our English language. Here I don't think we've seen the word confidence in these definitions translated that way, but it may be related with faith of belief. You have confidence in something that means you haven't really analyzed it. Oh, maybe you've analyzed it. It might fit to both faith, the lucid faith, and faith of conviction, and you have confidence in it. Ida, you have a thought?
Yes, you mentioned that to develop a conviction, you apply the 4 types of analysis. I think I missed the 4th one. You said that the Buddha is the perfect refuge, that the Dharma is the ultimate refuge, and that the Sangha is the aid for taking the medicine of the Dharma. What is the 4th analysis?
When we talk about 4 kinds of analysis, that came earlier.
Oh,
Or maybe
okay.
it will come. Maybe it will come when we talk about prajna. Here, we're just talking about. If you talk about the triple gem, so why are they perfect refuges? To take refuge, you have to have 2 factors, right? Do you know what the 2 factors are to take refuge? To be successful in taking refuge. What is actual definition of taking refuge? Do you know, Ida?
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, you have to have faith. You have to have conviction.
Right. What's the other factor that you need?
I'm not sure.
You need to have fear. You need to have.
Oh.
You have to have some trepidation that just going along without finding a refuge is okay. You have to have some. You have to be absent of that. You have to have some fear that if you don't find some refuge,
Right.
as George Bush once said, you're in deep doo-doo. That there'll be suffering in the lower realms, that your whole life being preyed on by the delusions and karma, that without some kind of way to get through this, you're going to have continual problems. Whereas if you find refuge from those sufferings by practicing the Dharma, that you will, that you will find some safety, some protection from them, refuge or protection. So when we analyze the Buddha, we have to see that he has the qualities that would be present in a perfect refuge. Someone who knows all that is to be known, someone who he or herself is free from all suffering. These are things that we can't ascertain through direct realization at the beginning, but we develop more and more conviction by studying the scriptures, by actually making realizations. Like I said before, realizing that the Dharma works when you apply the antidotes to get rid of negative states of mind. They work. Then you develop more and more conviction. The ultimate way that Dharmakirti said in his texts, the great logician, how faith arises is by making realization of selflessness and emptiness. When you realize that the Buddha taught that which no one else taught, selflessness, all of the Indian traditions, whether we call them Hindu or Vedic or whatever, the other, the Jains and so forth, all talked about there was a self. The Buddha taught there is no self. in a very particular way. If we talk about from Madhyamika point of view, there's no inherently existent self. When you see that that is true, something that no one else propounded, something that is so counterintuitive, something that doesn't appear to the mind inherent, naturally, you realize that the Buddha did not lie about other things, about the law of cause and effect and so forth, and that the Buddha was a perfect teacher. So let me continue on a little more. I'm not sure I answered that question in entirety, but so in accordance with how they appear in the great treatises, you analyze the modes in detail with the wisdom of individual investigation, examining the way in which they are generated in the continuum. By turning your mind inwards, then you will get to know them. You cannot know them merely through words. So here we're applying that statement to faith. You can talk about these various divisions, but try to see in your own mind how these appear, whether you have these kinds of faith. Maybe you can you can develop the desire to generate faith, recognizing I don't have faith in the gurus, I don't have complete faith in the Dharma, realizing that that's impeding your practice, because without faith, there's no aspiration to achieve these states. So ask yourself how I can develop faith. With these meanings in mind, Lama Tsongkhapa, say the foremost omniscient one, sort of epithet the Gelugpas will say for Tsongkhapa, repeatedly advises that in order to perform wholehearted practice, you must rely upon a skillful spiritual friend, skillful guru, and acquire much learning on the meaning of the scriptures. You need to have a spiritual guide, even making carpentry and learning to cook. You need to have someone, you can learn a little bit from books, but people go to chef school and carpentry, they apprentice under a carpenter and so forth, because it's something that you don't know intuitively. So in the spiritual realm, you need even more a spiritual guide, and you have to rely on much hearing. That includes reading, because as we talked about before, when we talked about tuba hearing, it also includes reading. Much hearing on the meaning of the scriptures. You need to study the scriptures. You have to hear and read about it. However, nowadays, when these great textual systems are explained to foolish beings who are deprived of the gem of intelligence and who are inferior in merit. One of my friends my Dharma friends in Washington, D.C. is a poll worker right now for the coming election. She said, George, she said, you would be surprised about the amount of misinformation, when you talk, you can imagine what I'm talking about here. So people that are deprived of the gem of intelligence and are inferior in merit, because to make realizations, to correctly understand things depends upon your accumulation of merit. When these difficult subjects, textual systems and so forth, are explained, they become frightened, terrified, and flee far away, as though a poisonous snake has sensed the odor of musk, or a little child has caught sight of the whirlpool. Those who view the exalted speech of the great scholars and adepts from the land of the superiors, it's when we say the Arya Dasha in Sanskrit, Arya means superiors, and Dasha means land. So Arya Dasha is a synonym of India. So the land of the Aryas, maybe where the Aryan beings came from the Central Asian plateau earlier, lighter skinned, they called themselves Aryas because they considered themselves superior. But then the word Arya was used by the Buddha. It said, didn't matter your caste, whether you're superior, whether you're a Brahmin or something. Arya being is someone who's realized the Four Noble Truths directly. You know, that's an Arya being. So those who view the exalted speech of the great scholars and adepts from the land of superiors as pith instructions seem like stars during the daytime. Very difficult to find people who actually go back to the scriptures and investigate what's being said and take that as their instruction rather than some generalized kind of thing. Here, the function of faith is specified as acting as a support for aspiration, because, as explained above, the cause of all excellent qualities is effort. You know, to develop virtuous qualities, you need effort. In order to generate effort, one needs the aspiration that seeks. You need to have aspiration to, like when we talked about developing single-pointed concentration, tranquil abiding. Tranquil abiding is the goal. In order to achieve that, you need effort. You need to do it again and again, applying all of the methods and so forth. In order to have that kind of effort, you need to have aspiration for tranquil abiding. Otherwise, you'd never put the effort. And in order to have that aspiration, you need to have faith that those qualities exist. In order to generate effort, one needs aspiration that seeks. In order to generate aspiration, one needs to see the excellent qualities as well as possess the faith of conviction, stronger kind of faith, that you're convinced that these things exist. For this reason, faith is praised more than once as the foundation of all virtuous qualities in the scriptures and their commentaries. I mentioned, I think in one of the other courses, Geshe Repton, when he lived in Dharamsala in McLeodganj, when he was alive, in the previous Geshe Repton, he would notice a lot of people coming by his cabin to go up the hills to meditate and to try to develop tranquil abiding, even Tibetans, maybe some Westerners. And he said he would notice that in a couple of weeks, he would ask them, where are you going? They said, we're going to develop Shine. And when, after a couple of weeks, they would come down looking, frowning and, like defeated. And he would say, what happened? And they would say, Shini Mindu, which means tranquil abiding doesn't exist. They didn't have the effort to continue because they didn't have, the sufficient aspiration to achieve it that was based on conviction that it was achievable, because they didn't have the faith. So in this vein, in this way, the formula of the three jewels blaze, is one particular sutra or dharani, says faith is the forerunner and like a mother is the procreator. It guards and increases all excellent qualities. It dispels doubts and frees you from the four great rivers. This comes sometimes in the scriptures. We talk about the four rivers: ignorance, wrong views, existence, and craving. Faith signifies the city of happiness and goodness. Faith is without murkiness. Remember, it's one of the qualities of faith that eliminates the darkness of the mind and uncertainties and so forth, and clarifies the mind. It abandons pride and is the root of respect. So when we talk about faith and respect of the guru, faith is sort of like the first thing that you want to develop, and then to develop respect by remembering the kindness. Faith is a jewel, a treasure, and the best of feet. Like hands, it is the root of gathering virtue. Another quotation from Sutra: faith is the best of vehicles through which you will be guided and definitely emerge. Therefore, intelligent people rely on following faith. So if you have intelligence and you think, I don't need faith, I just use logic, that's not the deepest kind of intelligent. Intelligent ones realize you need both faith and intelligence, wisdom and reasoning. And so those things that you can't prove yet, you need to have faith in. Wholesome qualities do not grow in people who have no faith, just as green sprouts do not grow from seeds scorched by fire. One of the sayings I've mentioned in some of the previous courses is a Tibetan expression. In the spring, a little bit different. In the spring, the first grass grows in the lowest valleys. During the summer, it begins to grow on the sides of the mountains, but it never grows on the snowy peaks. This is more talking, rather than faith, this is more talking about pride, which here was mentioned. Where did we say? We said something about here that overcomes pride. Yeah, it abandons pride. Faith abandons pride. So in the mind which is lacking pride, that is humble, realizations grow more quickly. With a mind that's always finding fault in the teachings or the teacher or something like that, that considers itself better, there's not the opening for those realizations that come into their mind. So faith helps to eliminate that kind of pride. Thus, all wholesome qualities are companions of faith. In fact, I think it says that when you have a virtuous state of mind among the retinue of the primary mind, faith will always be present with virtuous states of mind. Thus, all wholesome qualities are companions of faith. In Shantideva's second most famous text, most famous text, Bodhisattva-charyavatara, right? The companion text to that is his compendium of trainings, the Siksha Samuchaya. Has anyone read that book? Bob, have you read Siksha Samuchaya? And you have that book in your library, though. Read it. Break the binding. In the end of the Bodhisattva-charyavatara, it said that Shantideva, when he was reciting it to this assembly of monks at, I think it was Nalanda, right? That he, in meditative equipoise, he began to rise off the meditation cushion and disappeared into emptiness and continued till the text was over. And so the monks were amazed, and they wanted to find him afterwards to find what the scriptural sources for all of the Bodhisattva-charyavatara was. So they searched and searched, didn't find him for a long time. Finally, they were able to locate him, and they asked him for the sources. And so he wrote the book, the Siksha Samuchaya, compendium of trainings, that it gives all of the scriptural resources, scriptural sources for the assertions of the Bodhisattva-charyavatara. So it's very important text. If you have a chance to find, there's some recent translations of it, very, very good. So where do we say here? He says, in that text, it says, having made firm the root of faith, thus all wholesome qualities are companions of faith. Shantideva's compendium of trainings states, having made firm the root of faith, it also teaches that faith is the root of all paths. Even the great being, the protector of Nagarjuna, emphatically taught that faith is the foundation of all paths. With these meanings in mind, Tsongkhapa said, training in faith, the root, training in faith, comma, the root, unquote, one of the outlines of his great expositions of the stages of the path, and stated that the root of all happiness and goodness is the faith of conviction. So if you recognize that the opposite of faith is non-faith, Sometimes you could say the opposite of faith is having wrong views, right? That karma doesn't exist, that there's no enlightenment, there's no past and future lives. That's an extreme. Just not having faith is the opposite of faith. So even though you don't have a strong wrong view that these things don't exist, just not having faith in them is non-faith. What we'd like to be able to do is overcome that and to develop faith in these things. And so seek out the methods to develop faith in these, to develop faith in the Guru by reading the sections on Guru devotion, develop faith in the Triple Gem by reading the explanations of refuge in the Lanrim and in other texts like the Uttara Tantra and so forth. Are we okay? Doris, you have a question.
I was kind of lost in thought there. Did I hear you correctly that faith is present in all virtuous minds?
So yeah, so say for instance, mind becomes virtuous by the presence of a virtuous mental factor, right? In the retinue of that mind, faith will always be present also. Of course, just faith by itself, even if no other virtuous mental factor of these 11 virtuous mental factors, that mind becomes a virtuous by the presence of faith being present. But when other mental factors, virtuous mental factors are present, shame, enthusiasm, non-attachment and so forth, faith will always be present in that mind also to some degree. Okay? You okay? So second one of these 11 virtuous mental factors, and the third are called shame and embarrassment, or you could say sense of shame. Ngotsa itself, like it says, you see in your text there, ngotsa shepa in parentheses. So it's Tibetan. Ngotsa shepa. Ngotsa means shame. Shepa means knowing or sense of shame or knowing shame. Embarrassment is telyoba. You could call it regard for others also. So what are these two things? These are states of mind. So we'll say, what is shame? It is an avoidance of misdeeds on account of oneself. Embarrassment is the avoidance of misdeeds on account of others. So they're very related. Shame or sense of shame is a state of mind that thinks I shouldn't do this because it will have repercussions on myself. Either others will dislike me, or they say, or that I will experience some karmic, I myself will experience, I shouldn't do this. I shouldn't steal because I'll be impoverished in the future. I'll have some karmic consequences. I shouldn't get angry because I will have karmic consequences of that. Whereas embarrassment or concern for others is avoiding negative actions out of taking others into account, on account of others. Say, for instance, thinking my gurus or the Sangha will be disappointed if I do that, or the public will lose faith in the Dharma if I go around naked or swearing in the marketplace or something like that. Karen, or Z plus AIS.
It's my superpower. And I apologize because I'm not feeling very well, but you answered, yeah, but it's all good because I got my booster COVID shot.
Okay, good.
So good
Sure.
sick. But you answered my question. When I read shame and embarrassment before, it seemed like attachment was there. But with your explanation, it's clearly attachment isn't there. I don't think.
Attachment is a delusion, is a klesha. So these are not due to attachment to oneself, but just like a wisdom consciousness that thinks, if I steal, once you get to know it, if I steal, I will experience the karmic consequences of that in the future. I'll be impoverished and so forth. If I lie, people will lie to me. If I get angry, my reputation will go down and so forth. Ida, you have another thought?
Yes. How about if we use the word integrity instead of shame? I think it's mentioned in the foundation of Buddhist practice by His Holiness.
Yeah.
Shame has such a negative connotation.
Yeah. I like that. So you could say integrity. I think that would be good. What's another? You can play around with it. You can look in the what's it called? What's it, a book called? It has all the synonyms. Thesaurus. You can look in the thesaurus, see if some other words resonate, and then see if the implications of those words fit the definition of what we're calling here knowing, shame, or integrity. Stephen, do you have a thought?
Yeah, thank you, Venerable George. So just what popped into my mind was self-respect. I think it was, again, Don Hendrick used that terminology, and that kind of avoids, that what Aida brought up, the negative connotation of shame.
Right. Self-respect, that's what I was trying to drag up from my mind. Self-respect, concern for oneself, consideration of oneself. You could call it consideration of oneself, consideration of others. Self-respect, integrity both work. So let's go a little more detail. What is shame or respect, consideration of oneself, or self-respect? It is an avoidance of misdeeds on account of oneself. It has the function of acting as support for effective restraint from misconduct. So in his letter to a friend, Nagarjuna, to the king, who was his friend, who was not a monk, he had all these other responsibilities. Nagarjuna said, very, very important at the beginning is to avoid negative actions is to have shame and embarrassment, or self-respect and consideration for others, integrity and respect for others. Because they can act as the pedal when you're about to speed on in anger or attachment, or actions of stealing or lying or harsh speech and so forth. They can act as the brake to stop you from entering into those actions. When you restrain from negative actions, you create virtue. Simply, right now, let me see here. Who have I not to? Rowena, are you angry right now? No, right? So are you creating virtuous karma by having non-anger? No. Not simply because anger is not present in your mind. If you had non-anger, actually means an antidote to anger.
Okay.
So having the thought, the antidote to anger would create virtuous karma. So shame here, or integrity and embarrassment, consideration of others, they are antidotes to negative actions. So they can prevent you from generating them. Even mental actions. How would others know what you're thinking? Donnie, how would others know what you're thinking? Say you say, I shouldn't, feeling malice or avarice, how would anyone know what you're thinking? You have to unmute. You have to unmute your computer. You don't know how to do that? There's some button there that says, on the lower left-hand side, there's a little button that says mute or unmute. If you move your cursor down there. Okay, Doesn't matter.
No, you don't understand. I just installed Windows 11 and I was on a different desktop and so sorry, I apologize about that.
No. It's
How would
Windows 11. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's brand new. How would others know what I'm thinking?
Yeah.
They don't know.
They don't know, right? Unless they have clairvoyance.
Yeah.
How about the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and gurus? So, the fact that the Buddha would know what you're thinking, or your gurus would know what you're thinking, that can, feeling some embarrassment, some concern that others would think, oh, George has lost it now, he's getting angry and so forth. That could also help, not just actions of body and speech, but also actions of mind can help you prevent going into those. Just as is said above, shame is an avoidance of misdeeds on account of oneself, taking oneself as the main reason. Embarrassment, it's an avoidance of misdeeds on account of others. It has the function of just that, as was said above, acting as a support for effective restraint from misconduct. As been said above, shame is avoidance of misconduct on account of others, and on account of others. So then discussion of this pair, shame and embarrassment. What's the difference between shame and embarrassment? Although both of them are similar in terms of avoiding misconduct, shame is such that when one is about to engage in misconduct, one avoids thinking, this is not something I should do. In the case of embarrassment, when one comes close to engaging in misconduct, one avoids it on account of others, thinking, if others were to despise me as a result of doing this action, that would not be fitting, that would be unfitting, that wouldn't be good. One avoids misconduct due to concern about the displeasure of one's gurus or teachers, the principal objects causing this avoidance. Their function is specified as acting as a support of effective restraint from misconduct, because shame and embarrassment are definitely necessary for restraining misconduct of the body, speech, and mind, of the triplet, body, speech, and mind. If shame and embarrassment are absent, one will be unable to restrain oneself from any misconduct whatsoever. What do we say? What was the famous thing, McCarthy era? Some guy said, "Have you no shame?" Do you remember that? Isn't that what he said? Something like that? A famous quotation when McCarthy was badgering people and, making ridiculous things. Have you no shame? Without their function, what was I here? If shame and embarrassment are absent, one will be unable to restrain oneself from any misconduct whatsoever. For without fear about the fruition from one's own side, and lacking concern about the displeasure of one's gurus, teachers, and so forth, even the public, if a monk or nun were to do, be making money in the marketplace, selling things, so forth, the public would lose faith, or, playing, going to the discotheque or something like that, the public would lose faith in the Sangha. So that would be example of having shame, restraining from those. There will be no way to cease misconduct. David, I'm sorry, I ignored you there for a minute. What's your thought?
No worries, Venerable George, thank you. I just, the sentence above that paragraph, which says, just has been said above, shame is an avoidance of misconduct on account of others. Before I correct it, I think it's a typo, right? It's supposed to be embarrassment is an avoidance of misconduct on account of others.
Right.
Okay.
Because that same sentence comes for after shame. It says, just as has been said above, shame is avoidance of misdeeds on account of oneself. Here it should say, just as has been said above, embarrassment is the avoidance of misconduct on account of others. So they pasted that below, but they didn't change both words. They changed.
Thank you. Before I change that, I want to make sure I wasn't going to mess something up.
Right. I will mention that to Suji. Suji sent me a revised copy of the of this text when we were talking about, what was it, discrimination. Remember, discrimination, it said unreasoning, and it should have been discrimination without signs and with signs and so forth. So, as Nagarjuna said to the king, you know, you need, this is sort of like basic stuff. Having a sense of shame and embarrassment can help you from entering into negative actions of body, speech, and mind, which would include just even the arisal of malice and avarice, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? Malice, the extreme form of attachment when you want to get something, covetousness and wrong views. It can help you from, you know, if you notice wrong views arising and you realize that the omniscient mind knows exactly what you're thinking, your gurus know, the Dalai Lama knows, Lama Zopa knows, you can feel some sense of embarrassment and try to subdue those. Okay, how are we doing? Okay. Okay. So next one, now there are what are called the 3 roots of virtue. Have you heard the 3 roots of non-virtue? What would those be? Christine.
Well, attachment, ignorance, and the opposites, whatever, attachment, ignorance, and what's the third one? Hatred.
Hatred or anger, yeah. So there's a little difference between hatred and anger. There's a little difference between ignorance and what are we calling here the third one? It says non-ignorance, but it says timug. It's not the usual word for ignorance. It's more like non-bewilderment. So there's a difference when we talk about the 3 roots. Attachment is usually the same, but when we talk about the 3 poisonous minds, we can talk about ignorance. We can talk about bewilderment, attachment, and hatred. Sometimes in the negative mental factors, we talk about attachment, ignorance, and anger, as opposed to hatred. Anger as opposed to hatred, and ignorance as opposed to bewilderment. So there's a slight difference between them, but let's go through. These now are called the 3 roots of virtue: non-attachment, non-hatred, and non-bewilderment, or as she's translated here, non-ignorance, timug. Usually the word for ignorance is marikpa, right? Do you know, Bob, do you know the Sanskrit for marikpa, for ignorance?
Moha.
No, that's actually timug meba. The ignorance is usually avidya. Vidya is like knowledge. Vidyadaras, the knowledge holders, or and so forth. So usually ignorance is avidya, opposite of knowing, not knowing, whereas this is here it is timug mepa, which is amoha, as you said.
Yeah, I think Geshe Rapchin is, or one of the other people listed this as amoha that I looked up.
Right, because here it says timug mepa. It actually is not correct to say non-ignorance if we translate ignorance as avidya. Okay, so this, you're right. This is amoha, but generally ignorance is avidya, not knowing, marikpa. So non-attachment, first one. What is non-attachment? Again, from the Abhidharma Samachaya, Asanga's text. It is a lack of attachment to cyclic existence and the articles of cyclic existence. You know, that which exists in cyclic existence. It has the function of acting as a support for non-engagement in misconduct. So a little further on in the page, in this section, I think it says the following, but it's not explicit here. Generally, non-attachment, this virtuous mental factor, is just not the simple, lack of attachment. Because right now, in any of our minds, attachment may not be present, manifest. That's not this mental factor, non-attachment. It almost sounds like that from the way this definition is written here. In Geshe Rapton's book, when he talks about it, and in other books, it points out detachment or non-attachment. Maybe detachment is better rather than non-attachment. Almost sounds like a simple lack of attachment. Detachment is a distinct mental factor that, when referring to an object within conditioned existence, cyclic existence, act as the actual remedy for attachment towards it. So non-attachment here is not just simply the lack of attachment, it's the actual antidote to attachment. Like, say, before, when I asked, who did I ask? Rowena, whether she was angry. And she said, no. So is that, the fact that she's not angry right now, is that a virtuous state of mind? It could be just a neutral state of mind, right? If you actually have in your mind the antidote to anger or hatred, that's virtuous state of mind. So when you take the precepts, the 24-hour precepts or precepts of a monk or nun, or the vows of a lay person, right? You are creating virtuous karma in vowing to avoid those actions. They become antidotes to those actions. Remember, even if you're not keeping in mind not to steal, right now you're not thinking, you don't have the opportunity to kill, let's say. And so the thought of killing doesn't arise. If the thought of killing doesn't arise in your mind right now, that's not necessarily virtuous. Right now, none of us are thinking of killing, other than some of you who would like to kill me because I'm becoming too complicated or something like that. But if you made a vow not to kill, even if the thought of not killing is not manifestly present, there is what's called a non-revelatory form. Remember when we talked about in tenets, there's a kind of form that is created when you've made that vow that impedes you from entering into those negative actions. So you're continuously creating virtuous karma. Otherwise, just simply not having taken a vow not to kill, if you haven't taken that vow, and simply being in a situation where there's no opportunity to kill or interest in killing right now, that doesn't create virtuous karma. But if you've taken the vow not to kill, even being in a similar state of mind, there's no opportunity to kill, there's no thought to kill right now, that is a virtuous state of mind, kind of like these 3 roots of virtue. Here, let's talk about attachment. So what is non-attachment? It is the lack of attachment to cyclic existence. But as Geshe Rapton says here, it acts as the actual remedy for attachment. I think that will come in Kachin Yeshe Gelson's text here a little bit later. Being removed from the object, it remains detached, and one does not grasp for it. It has the function of preventing attachment and increasing the remedy for it. So it prevents attachment from coming into the mind, and it acts as an antidote, preventing attachment and increasing the remedy for it. It's as you develop this mental root of virtue, it becomes stronger and stronger. So these three roots of virtue will be mentioned together later. But before I go on, Donnie, you have a thought?
What is the title of Geshe Robson's book?
It's called The Mind and Its Function.
Okay, thank you very much.
You may be able to find it in your library or something. It's out of print. And when we asked at the beginning of the course whether we could use it, the Tarpa Choling, I think, or Rapton Choling in Switzerland said, no, we're planning on coming out with a new edition. So we're not going to give you permission to use the PDF. So you may be able to find it somewhere. Christine, you have a thought?
Yes, thank you, Venerable George. Earlier, you said that non-attachment must be the antidote to attachment.
Right.
So it seems we would have to first have the inclination to be attached, and then we get non-attached. Is that correct or not?
No.
No.
You can actually develop by say, for instance, we've had attachment since beginningless time, right? It's
Right.
not as though that it's something that, is only going to occur here for the first time in numberless lives, or even in this lifetime. So
Right.
when you say, for instance, you see the disadvantages of cyclic existence, you see the disadvantages of attachment, and you analyze them, and you realize that it is possible to avoid attachment. Attachment is a state of mind that we'll learn later is a state of mind that is viewed something that is pleasant, that has brought a feeling of pleasure to your mind or body. And having done so, it exaggerates the qualities of that. Attachment does, right? It exaggerates the qualities. Oh, if I had that, I'd really be happy. I'd always be happy. I'd be inherently happy. All of the various incrustations of that. And then because of those exaggerations, the mind sinks into the object and wants to get it. Once you recognize the disadvantages of attachment and you've analyzed all of these wrong reasonings, what are called inappropriate attention, when you look at something and you're paying attention to it inappropriately. Oh, wow, that's really nice. And in so doing, you generate attachment. When you recognize the mechanism of that, you can actually apply the antidote to that by seeing the opposite. It's not permanent. It's not permanent happiness. In fact, it's the nature of suffering. It's not inherently existent happiness. It's not real happiness, and so forth. Once you've analyzed in that way, you can develop a state of mind that wants to resist attachment. That's a non-attachment.
Oh, okay.
Right.
But just resist it. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Stephen?
Oh, thank you, Venerable George. So what comes up in my mind is also the term renunciation. And when I think about it vis-a-vis non-attachment, I kind of think of renunciation as sort of like a culmination of non-attachment. Does that make any sense to you?
Yes. So of the various kinds of non-attachment, you can have non-attachment to things in cyclic existence, apples and stracciatella ice cream, or, the newest dress in the showroom. You can have non-attachment to cyclic existence, which is a deeper type, which is called renunciation. And you can have non-attachment to the bliss of nirvana. So, for instance, the arhats have still that kind of, they don't have that kind of non-attachment. They still will cling to the bliss of nirvana. Whereas the bodhisattvas they have fears of both samsara and nirvana. So they develop an even deeper kind of antipathy toward nirvana, which also falls under non-attachment. Okay, So there are three varieties. I think either here or in another book that I'll read from, we talk about those. So let me mention here, non-hatred and non-ignorance are the same things as non-attachment. They're not merely the lack of hatred or the lack of ignorance or bewilderment. They're actually antidotes to them, actual remedies. Remedy and antidote, two ways of translating the same word. When you have some poison, you take the antidote or remedy to that, right? So what is non-hatred? Is a lack of malice with regard to sentient beings, suffering, and the sources of suffering. So it's not, our text says it's the lack, but implied here is it's the actual antidote to them. It has the function of acting as a support for non-engagement in what did I say? It has a function of acting as a support of non-engagement in misconduct. Non-ignorance or non-bewilderment, the same thing. What is non-ignorance or non-bewilderment? It is knowledge. It's not just the lack of bewilderment, it's actual positive. It is knowledge arisen from fruition, scripture, contemplation, or realization. So you can say fruition means innate kind of knowledge coming from karma from previous lives, from scripture, from reading scriptures, from contemplating, and from meditating, or realization here it says, and is a wisdom of individual investigation. It has the function of acting as a support for the non-engagement in misconduct. So we'll go through those again next time. Before we end, any last thoughts, last qualms, questions? Dylan, how did you find today? This was your first time, right?
I thought it was great. I'm in that situation where I missed all the classes before, so I'm a little lost, but I saw some of your videos online. I can go back and catch up.
I think they're all up on YouTube, unless I'm mistaken. You can go back and catch up.
I do want to say, since you asked me though, and since I'm so new, a lot of stuff just happened to me as far as realization, things that maybe I didn't understand before. I still don't quite understand, but I have more understanding than no understanding now. And I appreciate that.
Yeah. All right. So it's a cumulative process, obviously. And that's why having a chance to study something in depth like this, my teacher, Geshe Zogo, used to say, these are the kind of things that a lot of people avoid, right? It seemed like dry stuff going over these details. Geshe said at the beginning, of course, he said, now we're going to be chewing dry bones, tough, dry bones, not like, the luscious tofu or tempeh, or for the carnivorous, luscious steak, but the dry bones. And there's a great reason for that. As was said above, all of these scriptural things that the Buddha taught were meant for actual instruction, meant as actual things that we should investigate and integrate. They're not just simplified and dumbed down in something simple. And the more that you understand it, the more that will leave an imprint in your mind for further this lifetime and in future lifetimes. I remember Geshe Darge used to say the word dharma, the Indian word dharma, Buddha Dharma Sangha, in Tibetan Che. In the dictionary, there are at least 13 different meanings of dharma. And so in investigating those and seeing their overlap and in the differentiations between them, it leaves a better understanding in your mind of being able to practice, when we talk about the holy dharma, the sada dharma. Also, we talk about worldly dharmas, the 8 worldly dharmas. The meaning of dharma there is a little bit different. Dharma is that which, in one sense, supports from suffering. So the holy dharma. Worldly dharmas are that which we think support us from suffering, having wealth and fame and reputation, and so forth. Anyone else have a thought? Okay, so we're going to do a little short dedication. To dedicate, it's not just merely saying words, but it's a mental activity. Verbal can help to bring up the mental state. We're trying to link the virtues that we created today, that we created in past lives, and the virtues that we're going to create in the future. You can dedicate them again and again. It's a state of mind that wishes, aspires that they ripen in a particular way, like pulling the reins on a horse to make the horse go in the way you want it to go. It's not simply prayer, dedication. Prayer is just wishing something will happen in the future. Dedication is wishing that these virtues will ripen in this particular way, that they ripen in the future in our continued spiritual development, becoming a better person, happier person for ourselves, less harmful to others, that we might be able to develop eventually the states of renunciation, bodhicitta, and the wisdom realizing emptiness, up to and including the practice of the bodhisattva path, perhaps the tantric path. Due to these merits, may I quickly become an enlightened being for the sake of all sentient beings, not only for my own sake. My own sake will be included in there, because when we have the Dharmakaya, we have unqualified bliss, total, blissful state of mind, confidence and happiness and so forth. But also from that state of being omniscient, being a Buddha, we can effortlessly and spontaneously bring about the happiness of all sentient beings, leading them into that same state. Due to these merits, may I quickly become enlightened for the sake of all sentient beings. And that way, whatever way they ripen in the future, if I'm wealthy, I'll use it to benefit sentient beings or use it for the proliferation of the Dharma, helping Dharma centers, print books, make statues, and so forth. If I'm attractive, I won't use that. I won't allow that to become a source of pride or beguiling people for my own purposes, but I'll use it like the dakinis, the true dakinis, use it to entice members, people that find myself attractive, to enter into the practice of Dharma and so forth. So thank you very much. Enjoy, get your booster if you haven't already gotten it, and see you next week.